Appreciate you coming in, Ted O'Brien. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks for the introduction. I like being called a fool. It's a good way to kick things off.
Do you feel like that you and everybody else who was in the room was going to be sort of used as a sort of the veneer of legitimacy, as he says? Yeah,
look, I certainly had my suspicions that might be the case, but I was very clear both inside the room and outside the room of my views. So I think, if the government ever wants to rewrite history, my views are very clear and on record, and I'm happy to put even more views on record with you this morning.
So you were the only opposition person, the political opposition person who was in the room. What was your biggest takeaway you have from that 3-day event?
My personal biggest takeaway would be that the government is not prepared to tackle the single biggest problem relating to its budget, and that is it has to stop its spending spree. I have no confidence that the government is prepared to rein in its spending.
You were reported in the Financial Review as having a fiery exchange with Jim Chalmers over spending. Do you care to expand on that?
Well,
was it a fiery exchange?
Well, while it's not the language I would use, it's probably a fair description for others to use. I think the context, Steve, here is...
How does a Liberal Party leader have a fiery exchange?
We're talking about the cabinet room, so I can assure you it's not a contact sport.
Okay, right.
But certainly, my view being in the room in the first place was there's 25 people handpicked by the Treasurer. I saw my role really as representing the 27 million people who weren't in the room, and those 27 million Australians have been doing it tough. And in large part, that is because the government cannot control its spending. And I made that view very clear. Jim Chalmers didn't like that, and I think he took some offence to it. And I responded in kind when he thought that my statistics weren't right. Statistics such as debt hitting $1 trillion this year, hitting $1.2 trillion come the next election. The fact that spending has gone from 24% up to 27% of GDP, which means basically Jim Chalmers, the Labor Party's budget this year, they are spending $160 billion more than the last budget of the coalition. They have thrown out any rules to control spending. And my main recommendation in that conversation was you have to restore fiscal responsibility. And that starts by restoring rules, whether that be spending to GDP, tax to GDP. There are different ways of doing it. But unless you're prepared to put rules on yourself, you're just going to keep on spending.
There were a lot of other smart people in the room who weren't politicians. Did anyone in the room support your position, either privately or publicly?
People didn't buy into the disagreement between the Treasurer and me, and I don't blame them. We went at it for a little while, but when it comes to the idea of there being fiscal rules in place, yes, other people did support that notion.
Were you surprised to be in the room at all? Because it was a Labor government, productivity roundtable.
Yeah, look,
were you surprised that you were invited at all?
I was surprised initially. I listened to what the Prime Minister and then the Treasurer had said, 3 months ago almost about why they were doing this. And I said publicly then, we're prepared to be constructive where we can. We'll be critical where we must. There's no doubt the budget is not sustainable. The Treasurer admitted as much. And so in good faith, I decided, yes, I'd accept the invitation and go along. Of course, since that initial invitation and the round table itself, the government changed its position multiple times about the purpose of the entire thing. So it took them 3 years to work out that living standards are falling in Australia. It took them 3 months to organise a 3-day meeting. And now they've got 3 years to try to prove they're going to do something about it.
The Financial Review says you were seated next to the tea and coffee trolley. Did anyone ask you to make them a cuppa?
Well, that was in case Jim Chalmers wanted me to get him a bicky.
Right. Why wasn't Susan Lee the leader there instead of you?
Well, I think this was hosted by the Treasurer. I'm the shadow Treasurer. I assume, therefore, it was just appropriate to have Jim Chalmers' counterpart there rather than Anthony Albanese's.
My guest is Ted O'Brien. He's the LNP member for Fairfax, the federal electorate here in Queensland, based on the Sunshine Coast. He was one of those, in fact, he was the only opposition politician in the room at the Productivity Roundtable for the last 3 days. Senator Matt Canavan, formerly of the Productivity Commission, formerly a director of the Productivity Commission, He's on your team these days here in Queensland. He is on the backbench. He's not on the front bench, so he doesn't have any weight in terms of your party's decision-making capacity. But he told me the biggest productivity issue in Australia is the 20% decline in productivity in the Australian energy sector. That every year for the last 20 years, the energy sector has gone back 1% every year. Is he right, Ted O'Brien?
Well, firstly, Matt is a close colleague, and each member of the joint party room does have influence on our policy. Everyone has a say, and that's the beauty of the...
He's not on the front bench, though.
But he's not on the front bench, you're right in that regard. I think Matt is right that one of our biggest productivity problems in this country is energy. And unfortunately, the roundtable run by Jim Chalmers did not adequately address that very issue.
Did anyone in the business... There was a whole lot of business representatives there, and they seemed to be very supine. Matt described it as the elephant in the room to me. Did anyone else in business who has to pay the electricity bills, did anyone else raise energy and the decline? I mean, to go back 20%, to decline 20% is a huge figure.
It's a huge figure. To put that in context, over the last 3 years of the Albanese government, productivity has gone backwards by 5%. The last year alone, 1%. But then when you look at electricity, well, you know, that's a problem in and of itself.
But no one in business raised it in the room. None of those business bigwigs raised it.
So the first one to really raise it very forcefully, Steve, to be honest, was me, because there was discussion about energy, but it was the wrong discussion. The discussion that Jim Chalmers had was around how can we get more capital, so more money from, let's say, super funds, to fast-track Labor's existing energy plan. That was the nature of the conversation. The point that I made in the room was you're trying to solve the wrong problem. The problem to solve isn't, you know, your race to your energy plan. The problem to solve is we need to have the cheapest form of electricity. How do we get that? It has to be reliable as we decarbonise over time. That's the problem to solve, not racing ahead with a policy which is only making Australians poorer and weaker. I mean, if you look at electricity prices, and everyone knows this already, I mean, electricity's up over 30%, gas is up over 30%. We have businesses closing, we have industries collapsing, we have sovereign capabilities being offshored because of our energy policy. The solution, therefore, isn't what Jim Chalmers thinks, which is let's get more money in to do more of the same. That'll only worsen the situation. What we have to do is do a proper analysis to say, what is the cheapest way of running our electricity grid? Because only if we do that can we get prices down for families and for businesses. If we want to have productivity, as in lift living standards in this country, we have to have cheaper energy. And I think on that point, Matt Canavan is spot on.
Was the Australian Industry Group in the room?
Yes.
Okay, and they said nothing. I mean, they said nothing about this.
So then when it comes to what other people said, I won't go to what individuals said, Steve. Happy to say what I said, but okay. More broadly, I can say certainly some in industry did talk about the importance of gas, because I had raised too that all the discussion had ignored gas. But for me, the single most important fuel we need right now is gas to get prices down. And as more renewables come on, you need gas to make the renewables work. It was ignored. Now, once I'd raised that, there were 3 other voices by memory from the business sector, which did come to the party, did come to the conversation, reinforcing the importance of gas.
But of all of those big business bigwigs, all of the representatives, including the ACTU for that matter, who represent workers, or 13% of the workforce in Australia, they didn't actually raise that 20% decline in productivity in energy in Australia over the last 20 years.
I certainly got no support from the ACTU, which shocks me, because not only are a lot of working families struggling with the price of electricity, but we have so many good unionised workers who are right now doing fantastic work throughout regional Australia in power plants which are going to be prematurely closed, and those workers are going to be looking for a lifeline. But no, the ACTU did not speak up on that count.
Ted O'Brien, Deputy Opposition Leader and Treasury Spokesperson for the Federal Opposition, is my studio guest. He was in the room at what Chris Richardson, the economist, described as akin to a golden ticket to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. End of quote. So how would you describe it now that it's all over? and we wait to see what's going to happen?
Well, actually, just on the Willy Wonka and the Charlie factory.
Chocolate factory.
They're the chocolate factory. I think it was this time last week I did a speech in Sydney where I did refer to Jim Chalmers as the Candyman. And the Candyman, of course, was the character in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And it goes to that very point. He's the Candyman. It's giveaway after giveaway. He can't stop his spending spree. And again, there's no evidence coming out of this roundtable that they are prepared to stop the spending spree, which is why debt will continue to go up and be put on future generations, and taxes will have to rise unless they get the spending under control.
Did you learn anything that caused you to rethink or examine a policy position of the federal opposition? Because you were in the room with all of these very influential business leaders, the new head of Treasury, Productivity Commission. Is there anything going to change about opposition policy, or that you learnt from being in the room for 3 days?
Steve, I did learn. I learnt a lot. And if there was one topic that really stretched my mind, it was artificial intelligence. There's no doubt about that. There's a very good discussion around AI, and you had some people in the room who know the technology well. And so I think that is an issue we are all grappling with. I mean, AI is here. It's influencing people's lives and workplaces today. But to where does it go? How does government respond to that? I'm a liberal at heart, which means I'm pro-technology. I believe in small government. And so I want to make sure that AI works for Australia and we leverage the technology, but we have to be open-eyed about the risks that might also be at play. So I found the AI discussion probably the most valuable of the lot.
The front page of today's Australian reports Danielle Wood, the head of the Productivity Commission, who was in the room for the whole time, and she addressed the National Press Club the day before it started. This was a productivity roundtable, according to the federal government. Danielle Wood was asked if the discussions would lift anything or lift growth in Australia to even 1.2%, the Treasury's target. And she says, I'm quoting from the Australian, I wouldn't go that far. She was asked if the outcome of the roundtable would increase productivity growth. She said it was at least pro-growth, which is a good thing. And that's about it. I need to ask you, was it very different? Was it in any way different to the Jobs and Skills Summit run 2 years ago by the federal government?
Steve, I can't really answer that well because I didn't attend that summit. What I can say, though, is I think she's right in her comments that you just referenced from the Oz Today.
I mentioned that because she was Jim Chalmers' personal pick.
That's right.
To head the Productivity Commission.
Yeah, exactly. And she was in the room. I mean, productivity is all about living standards, right? You don't raise living standards by raising taxes. You don't raise living standards by raising the cost burden on businesses. You don't raise living standards by raising the debt burden on future generations. I'm not convinced that Jim Chalmers learnt those three principles over the last 3 days.
Parliament returns next week in question time. What will you be putting to your opposite number, Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer, then? Steve,
please don't be offended by this, but I probably won't preempt what I might be asking in question time on radio. But if I just go back to the basics here, Australians are struggling. They